Good morning. We're glad you're joining us for Bible study this morning. Pastor Scott and I want to welcome Gordon Schanzenbach here with us. And we know that we'll have some good conversation this morning and kind of dive deep into what Matthew 5 verses 1 through 12 has for us. We're starting a new sermon series called Faithfully Waiting. The text for November really speak more to the end times, and as Paul would say, or as Paul has been, as it's been noted that Paul writes in this way, we're in the already but not yet. That the gospel, the good news, is already here, but it's not yet come to completion. So Faithfully Waiting is our sermon series, and Pastor Scott's going to read the lesson for us today, and then we'll see how it unfolds.
This is a very famous passage in Matthew 5 that we know as the Beatitudes. When Jesus saw the crowds, he went up the mountain, and after he sat down, his disciples came to him. Then he began to speak and taught them, saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven, for in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you."
Thank you. You know, it's interesting. I think that over the years we've taken this scripture and turned it into a list of ways to be blessed. And so it becomes a to-do list. You know, how do I become poor in spirit? How do I mourn? How do I become meek? And I don't think that Jesus is talking here about a list of to-dos.
No.
I believe that Jesus really is talking here about the qualities that you look for in a person who is faithfully waiting. These are the things that we look for as we are faithfully waiting. So, Gordon, in this text, is there anything that drew your attention or that jumped out at you?
Well, what always leads me to thinking, and when I get to this, is why is he doing this? And what is the audience? They say it's his disciples, yet he's only chosen a few, according to Matthew, by the time he gets to this point. And so who are his disciples? And he goes on the mountainside, and I'm reminded of Moses.
Yes.
You don't go on the mountainside with Moses.
Yeah.
So who goes on the mountainside? So who goes up with Jesus? So his disciples, it has to be a fairly small, highly interested group.
Right.
Whether it's the one he specifically chose, I think the Spirit of God has chosen them to go up there. Because I think this is a beginning where he lays out kind of a stop for his teaching. So I don't look at it individually. I think I'd like you people to tell me how you look at it as a whole.
Right.
What is the entire message?
Right.
And words jump out at me in this. The words that jumped out at me before this was kingdom of heaven.
Yes.
And then the very first phrase he talks about they're poor in spirit.
That one always
Not
sticks
in
out to me.
activity.
Right. Right.
Not in what they're doing.
Right.
It's spirit. And then he ends with that, your reward in heaven. So he must be talking about kind of a kingdom in heaven or a kingdom on earth. in this process.
Right.
And this
right.
would be the spirits. I look at it as the spirits. The spirit, the overall feeling you would have if you were in that heaven would be these things.
Right. I think that's where the already, but not yet comes into play, is that he's talking about heaven here, qualities that we will see in the, in heaven, but these are also qualities that have begun here. And they are qualities that Jesus is saying, if you see these qualities in someone, then you know that that person is faithful. You know that that person believes. And so I think, too, with the audience being the disciples, and Jesus is laying this out, I have to think that they're confused.
Yeah.
Because, this goes against it goes against the current order. It would be confusing if Jesus came and said that to us in our society. Because in our society, it's get ahead. Always get ahead. Always do whatever it takes to get the next promotion or the next raise or the next whatever it is. And Jesus is saying, well, that's not it. These are the qualities to look for in someone who is faithful. And
he's definitely flipping the script in a way
Yes.
of, if life is, and I can't speak for those who lived when Jesus did, but I would think everyone even then wanted a sense of contentment and happiness and peace and provision. And he's saying, he's like flipping the notion of that upside down, that it's not those who have enough food who will be blessed. It's not those who have a house and have all their needs met that will be blessed. In fact, it's the opposite. It's those who don't have enough, who not only hunger and thirst for righteousness, but the meek, and those who mourn, and those who don't have enough faith and hope. Those are the people that God is most lifting up.
I think it speaks too to the people that the disciples will see Jesus associating with here. He's not going to be associating with the religious leaders. He's going to be arguing with them and fighting with them. He is going to associate with these groups of people, and that goes against societal order. Absolutely. It's not going to be the way it was before. And so I think he's really saying to them, watch this. Watch this. And the blessings are not necessarily here. The blessings are, I believe, in heaven. These are the way we live our life here as we're faithfully waiting, knowing that there's something better to come.
Sometimes I look at these. The blessing is just simply to be able to have the grace of God allow you to possess this, to feel that way. And I think when I look at these and you talk about the world, the force of these in the world today, what is the force of the people who are poor in spirit? Or those who mourn, those who are meek, those who are peacemakers, what is their force in the world, and we might call it, Luther called the world of sin they live in, what is their force in combating that? And we see peacemakers and so on, and it's force. And some people get angry at peacemakers because they say they're agitators. They're just looking for change, and that creates the agitation.
Absolutely. I think that we see that in our world right now, especially with the protests that are going on, with the racism. Change has to happen. And unfortunately, it's gotten mixed up with folks who are coming in and looting. And I believe that most of the protesters are peacemakers. That, however, they've lived in this world for so long, that change has to happen. And it will only happen when we come on board to help make it happen. And I think that's some of what Jesus is looking at with the disciples too. If you keep going in this way, you're not really making the change. You're not really helping that change to happen, and these are the things that will be changing.
Jesus was bringing about a new kingdom on earth.
Right.
And to Bonnie's point, it is kind of an already but not yet. We call it a liminal space in seminary, where you could take a fatalist view and say, well, the world is always going to be sinful, so why bother? Why do anything to fix it?
Right.
But I don't know. I feel like the Beatitudes are kind of hinting, implying something that, yes, the perfect fullness of the kingdom will not be known on earth, but we can begin to usher it in by not only how we live, but how we view those who are pure in heart, and the meek, and the poor, and those who mourn. How we, if we're in that position, how we view that state of being, and how we view those who appear to be downtrodden and marginalized and without. If we view them as maybe especially blessed by God, I don't know. I feel like that's giving us a glimpse of heaven even now.
Yes.
Even, I don't think we'll fully fathom it on earth, but...
And I don't think we can.
Yeah.
Because we even have sinful natures. And so as much as we try to see it in that way, and we do, I mean, we're Christians, and so followers of Jesus, and we try, but even our sinfulness gets in the way and blinds us to what's happening in the world.
Yeah,
absolutely. He's beginning, they say that the whole thing, it's the beginning of his teaching, his sermon, as they call it. But, and we all know that this wasn't done in the sequence. I think about this when I think about the people, for the readers today. If you look at this, I think you have to stop. And you have to pause, think about it. I think the disciples had to do this. And I asked the question, what do these thoughts do with one's faith? What did the disciples see as a challenge? They knew, and Jesus was going to talk worse about himself and his death. They knew that this was going to be a great change for them. But did they have the faith to go ahead into that world of change? Did they have faith? I look at this as, have you got the faith to go into the kingdom?
Yes.
To enter the kingdom, to want to be in the kingdom, to live in the kingdom for them. And he told them at the end.
Right. You know, you just triggered a thought for me, Gordon, in that this is so early on in Jesus's teachings that it makes me wonder if Jesus is making the disciples aware. You know, they may not buy into these things, but if it's been presented to you, that you start seeing that in the world. So their awareness will cause them to see things in a different way, hopefully, and that will change their heart. Because it makes me think, you know, anytime I'm thinking about, or I become aware of something, and usually it's with cars or with vehicles. If I get a new vehicle, I think, gosh, nobody's ever driven a Captiva before, you know. And then all of a sudden, everybody has Captivas, right?
Yeah.
But it's my awareness. It's my awareness. And I think that's a bit of what, when you were just speaking, it made me think that perhaps this is about awareness, and that he's opening their eyes to see the world in a different way.
Yeah, and I'm thinking of words in the songs we hear once in a while. Would they walk away from here singing, I saw the light? Or would they walk away and say, oh.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and they may be looking at it because, let's take it from their perspective at that time. You know, and I love this about Matthew's gospel, because we have to remember that Matthew's audience are the Jewish people who, from the Old Testament into here. And so Matthew is trying to convince them that Jesus is the Messiah, and that's the way he's looking at things. And so we have to remember that the disciples are all Jewish men. And what they're looking at this, I would bet what they're looking at this is and going, oh my gosh, we already have 613 laws.
Yeah.
How can Jesus add more laws to this?
Yeah.
I have to wonder if they're looking at this, exactly, not going away saying, I've seen the light, but rather heavy laden. Here's more. How am I going to do all of this?
And perhaps it is intended to do that today, to make us aware that the choices we make
Yes.
are going to be heavy on our soul.
Yes.
They might be heavy on our mind, some choices. Some are going to be heavy on our pocketbooks. And all these things, we think about that. But how many times do we have thoughts that are going to be heavy on our soul?
Yes.
These have to be,
Yes.
to them, heavy on their soul.
Absolutely.
In the Old Testament soul.
Yeah.
And it's funny, these people knew the Old Testament, didn't they?
Yeah, they
The
did.
disciples knew.
I think the Beatitudes sum up that, I don't know if it's Henry Nouwen saying about the Bible is comfort for those afflicted and affliction for those comfortable.
Yes.
And I feel like over the past decade, I've slowly viewed a life of faith as not, a life of comfort and a life of ease and a life of wealth or, easy street. I viewed a life of faith somewhat through the lens of the Beatitudes, I think, maybe even without knowing it. A life of faith is about finding God in the midst of despair, in the midst of those kind of dark valleys.
Yes.
And in times of joy too, not to exclude times of joy and contentment, but I really believe that God is a God of the poor. God is a God who is an advocate for those most outcast and beaten down in life. Because Jesus, I think, was somewhat talking about himself. You can see in verse 10 and 11.
Right.
He's talking about what is to come for him. And that's God in flesh.
Yes.
So I think sometimes, we need our view of a life of faith flipped upside down. And our expectations of God corrected all the time, and I think the Beatitudes do that.
I do too.
Well, Paul reflected this in his own life, didn't he?
Yes.
For all that we look at him, for all that he accomplished, he really had some things that bothered him. And I think those very things was he couldn't achieve what he wanted to achieve. He couldn't achieve all of these all the time.
Right.
Paul was the type of guy that he wanted to wear his accolades on his sleeves.
Yes.
No one's been more faithful than
Right.
I, and kept the law better than I. And then it was this blinding, literal blinding
Yes.
humbleness that came upon him that helped him to see the light, and he realized that all of that didn't matter.
Right.
You know?
What I love when he recites his resume. Recites his resume, and then, as you said, that he says none of that matters.
I consider it all rubbish.
Yeah,
but I'm going to name it all anyway.
Exactly. I'm going to tell you about it though first.
I wonder if you ever thought about it as the good old days.
Yes. 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 Yeah.
But that as much as we talk about it, that world helped shape him.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
That world helped shape him.
Well, think of who he was prior to becoming a believer.
Yeah.
And the Beatitudes, absolutely. I mean, that's the change that Jesus is talking about here, is that here is a worldly person believing that they're doing God's will. And when they come to realize the truth of God's will, how he changed and then was an agent for change in the world. Absolutely.
Well, the teachings he had in Matthew, someone commented about when I was reading about this, they commented that this was really kind of a code for the disciples. And I thought to myself, not really. It's more of a spiritual ambition that's only given to you through the Spirit of God. The Spirit of God is necessary for these things to develop in a human being. And you must approach the kingdom of heaven, in the sense that I see them saying to disciples, you must approach this in the same way. You must be prayerful and thoughtful of the Spirit being with you in what you do. And we know, this is what we kind of celebrate in the Pentecost, don't we? Is the Spirit coming to people and changing them. And this is the groundwork for it.
In essence, it's like I mentioned on Sunday that Martin Luther was looking for truth. He was so confused, and when he found that we are saved by grace through faith, and that my point on Sunday was we get faith from God, we get grace from God, we get salvation from God, everything comes from God. It makes me think that this is what Jesus is saying too, that the Spirit of God is with you, but these are the qualities of the Spirit of God.
Yeah, I think he's a tremendous teacher.
Yes.
But I think what he's done in his teaching, I think he always, in reality, when it was happening in the world with the disciples, they had pause for reflection. They had times. This wasn't all done in this. This is not a lesson plan. This is things that occurred, and that sometimes it's the experiences of the world around them that cause Jesus to teach.
Yes. Yes.
And it's that what taught him to teach, and teach them this is the kind of world you're going to be in. You're going to be facing the same thing. So his teaching is really just a massive collection of experiences with the disciples in the world that made him reflect on, to a large degree, I think, the Old Testament.
Yeah.
God's revelation to him through the Old Testament.
Absolutely. Jesus never missed a teachable moment.
Oh,
Never missed
that's
it.
what allowed him to, and getting out and doing what he did is what caused him to have teachable moments.
Yes, absolutely. Being in the world and with the people is what caused him to have those teachable moments. Well, I think that might be a good place for us to end today. Again, we're just grateful that you came to be with us, and that hopefully you heard or this caused you to think about something. Again, if you want to respond to us, you can comment on YouTube, or you can also send us an email and we will respond to you. So thank you again for being present with us this morning.